Okay, so now we're going to go into building rapport. And when rapport starts, it's going to be everything that happens the moment you meet somebody. Now, like we talked about, when you have a meeting with somebody, you're either going to go into the discovery or the qualification call. And there are going to be a couple elements when it comes to the discovery/qualification. The first one is going to be building rapport. That means you're building a human connection with someone, which is what we're going to go over in this section of the course. After that, it's setting the right expectations. Then you're going to uncover the prospect's pain. Afterwards is going to figure out the budget, and then you're going to find the decision-making process for the individual or the company. So again, in this section, we're going to go over building rapport. Now, when it comes to building rapport, here are the common mistakes a lot of people make when it comes to sales. There are a lot of times they're too focused on the technical aspects of the sell, and they try to tell the customer how great their product is. And they're not really focused on building a human connection. And one of the strongest things you can do in selling is to sell emotionally, but a lot of times, a lot of people try to sell logically instead. To give you an example of this, I want to just use a used car dealership. If you've ever been to a used car dealership, what typically happens is, they typically don't have the most trained salespeople. So when you come onto the lot, they try to sell you on all these cars that you don't need, and they try to sell it up as much as possible, saying like, oh, it's only got these many miles, or the air conditioner is great, and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times when you're here, you feel like people are just selling you. It's like a snake oil salesman type of vibe. And so what we want to do is we want to stray away from this and sell emotionally and build a human connection instead, rather than being so pushy. So an example of that is the iPhone. So every year, or for the most part, every year, Apple comes out with a new iPhone. Next thing is the iPhone 7, iPhone 8, and then the iPhone 10. And the thing is, even though there's only incremental improvements on each iteration of the iPhone, a lot of times people will line up to buy the new version. And when you ask them, why is it that they upgraded from an iPhone 8 to an iPhone 10, they will typically justify it like, oh, it's got this AR feature. Oh, it has a better camera and more memory and all these things. But in reality, these are all technical things that most people don't need. But Apple has done a great job with their marketing and getting people to love the brand, and they get their customers to buy emotionally, and then they justify logically. And that is why people continue to buy iPhones every single year, even though they don't need it. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how you can build an emotional connection with literally anybody with these skills, just like how Apple sells iPhones. So the main thing you want to keep in mind is that people buy emotionally and they justify their decisions logically, okay? And so with that in mind, here are the universal rules when it comes to building rapport. You must feel comfortable with yourself and other people, and they must feel comfortable with you. So if you're not comfortable with yourself and you're not confident, people can feel it and they get a little bit uneasy. So the first step is really in your game. It's feeling comfortable with yourself and who you are and having confidence. And that confidence is going to exude in an aura that it will be very attractive for customers. And because you're comfortable with yourself and the other person is comfortable with being around you, there's better communication and selling improves. Now, here are the elements of communication that you have to pay attention to the moment you meet somebody. So there has been a study done at UCLA so for the first 5 seconds where you meet somebody, there has been a study where 55% of whether or not people will like you is based on your body language. 38% is your tonality, and 7% is the words you're actually saying. So when you really look at this pie chart, 93% is going to be body language and tonality. So if you think about it, it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. So body language is going to be very important. And here are a couple of examples of bad body language. Slouching, when you're shifting your eyes too quickly, it makes you look like you're a little bit shady. Or if you're looking down as you speak, you're not confident in yourself. So imagine in a selling situation where someone's trying to sell you on their product and they're like shifting their eyes and slouching and not even looking at you in the eyes, then you just feel like you don't trust them, that even if their product was good, you just don't feel good buying it from them. Now, here's an example of good body language. You're sitting up straight, your shoulders back, you're confident, you're having great eye contact. And these are all subconscious things that you may not notice, but it's definitely not going to deter you from buying a product from someone who's doing or demonstrating good body language. So now that you got the idea of what body language is, let's go ahead and get into tonality. So what is tonality? It's going to be 3 different elements: pitch, pace, and volume. Pitch is how high you're talking or how low you're talking. And so, you want to find the right tonality that fits you. Pace is how fast you're speaking or how slowly. Because when you're talking too fast like this, nobody can really understand what you're saying. But if you are talking like this, people are going to get really annoyed. So having the right pace is also very important. And volume, if you're talking too loudly, it's going to make people uncomfortable. But if you're talking too softly, then it's also going to make people feel uncomfortable because they're going to think like, why is this guy talking so softly? It's very strange, right? So now we're going to go into the words, what you actually say. And, a lot of times it's going to be your word choice. For example, instead of using the word problem, which may have a negative connotation, you can use the word challenge. So an example would be, instead of saying, wow, you have a lot of problems, which sounds pretty negative, you could say, wow, there's a lot of challenges that we can overcome here. So in that example, you could take a problem and turn it into something like a fun challenge. So now that you got a brief introduction to tonality, body language, and the words you actually say, how do you actually use them to build rapport with a prospect? And so to do that, we're going to use a technique called mirroring and matching. One of the big things you have to keep in mind is people feel comfortable with other people who act and look like themselves. So what that means is when you're mirroring and matching somebody, what you're doing is you're mimicking the prospect's body language, tonality, and their words to make them feel comfortable. Like we covered earlier, body language, tonality, and words are the things that are going to determine whether or not somebody likes you within the first 5 seconds. And what you want to do is you want to read the room and you want to read the person, and you're basically going to mimic their body language, tonality, and their words. So for example, how they sit, the speed at how they talk, or the words they use, or the pitch they're using. So if somebody has a lower voice, you want to take your voice a little bit lower like this. Or if they're sitting, they cross their legs, you want to also sit down and cross your legs, because how weird would it be if they're sitting down, they cross their legs, and you're standing up and you cross your arms? It just doesn't fit. So if you mimic what they do, they're going to naturally feel comfortable with you, and it is wired in their brains. This all takes place in a prospect's subconscious. These are things that people don't even realize. They just get a feeling. But because you are going to learn all these tricks, you can actually execute on them and be conscious of your body language, tonality, and the words, and you can match it with your prospect. So in mirroring and matching, the prospects in their heads are subconsciously thinking, do I like this person? Do they make me feel comfortable? Is this person like me? And although people don't necessarily admit this, everyone's going to say that they're open-minded and they like to meet different types of people. For the most part, history has shown that people like other people who are similar to them, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just going to show you how you can use this to your advantage in selling situations. So let's say, I'm going to give you an example of mirroring and matching. So let's say we have me on the left side, I'm the salesman, and John over here is the prospect. So I'm trying to sell him my product over here. In the beginning, when you meet somebody, the first thing that happens is you shake their hand. And so when you're shaking their hand, an example of body language is whatever pressure they use when you're shaking hands with them, you want to mimic the same amount of pressure. So if they have a firm handshake, you also want to have a firm handshake. If they have a little bit of a limper or weaker handshake, you want to ease off a little bit, because I'll give you an example of where, some people might mess up. So when you're shaking somebody's hand, if they have a very firm handshake and you have a very limp handshake, automatically they're going to feel like, why is this guy's handshake so weak? On the other side, if you have a very strong and firm handshake and they have a very soft one, they're going to think, why is this guy so aggressive? So you want to match whatever pressure they have on their hand. And I know this might sound like a small thing, but these first 5 seconds are going to determine the framework of whether or not somebody likes you. And so let's say we go into John's office, he invites you in, and he says, Patrick, would you like a cup of coffee? Now, a lot of people make the common mistake of jumping to, yes, I would love coffee, give me cream and sugar, and blah, blah, blah. Basically, they think only about what they want when somebody asks. But the smarter thing to do is to mirror and match John. So, what you want to say, you want to reverse this guy and you say, are you having one? So, by asking if John is going to have a cup of coffee, either he's going to say yes or he's going to say no. If he says, no, Patrick, I'm not going to have a coffee, I just want to offer one. And then you could say, oh, that's totally fine, I'm good too. And so nobody gets coffee, but you mirror and matched him, and so he subconsciously likes you a little bit more. But if he says, yeah, I haven't had my coffee in the morning, I really need it, then you're gonna say, man, I need my coffee too. So by mirroring and matching him in this coffee example, you're basically getting this person like you because you're more similar to him. Throughout the conversation, it's not just about what you say, like the example I gave earlier, it's how you say it. So a lot of people, when they go into someone's office or when they're talking to somebody on the phone, they just don't know what to say. Should they talk about the weather? Should they talk about sports? Or what if they have nothing in common? The truth is, it literally does not matter what you say. A lot of times, when I'm in the sales meeting, I could just say, hey, how's it going, John? And he'll be like, oh, I'm doing good. And then you just talk about whatever. It literally does not matter. As long as you're matching their tonality and what they're saying, your body language is matching, this guy is basically going to like you. And, if you're doing it correctly, it will literally work every single time. I've done this hundreds or even thousands of times, and it literally works, mirror and matching. And, when you're doing this correctly, what you build something called instant rapport. You ever meet somebody where, the moment you meet them, the first 5 seconds, you just get the feeling, wow, I really like this guy, right? He seems like a really good guy, but you don't really know why that is. It's because that person is really good at reading the room and reading you and mirroring and matching you and making you feel comfortable. And so as a salesperson or an entrepreneur, that's what you want to do for other people. And so now that, you're talking about whether it's sports, whether it really doesn't matter, you want to transition into actually getting into the business meeting. So this is how you're going to do it in a very subtle and respectful way. So you're talking about the weather, blah, 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 blah. And then you're going to say, hey, John, I appreciate you taking the time to talk today. Do you mind if we go ahead and get started? And John's going to say, sure, sounds good. So now you're going to say, now, before we get into the discussion of your challenges and how we may be able to help you here, could you give me an overview of your role at the company and what you're looking to get out of the meeting so I can get a better idea of how I might be able to help? And from there, John's going to be like, oh, I'm the VP of marketing and this is what I do and blah, 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 blah. And so basically that's how you can transition into getting into the business meeting. You're just getting John to say, what his role is at the company, give a little introduction about himself or anybody else in the meeting that you're meeting for the first time. And then you're going to also ask them, what exactly they're trying to get out of the meeting. And that's one of the key things here, because by asking them what they want out of the meeting, you exactly know what they want. And so throughout the meeting, you can make sure that you address anything that they find important.